Hello everyone, it's so good to be here yet again. I promised myself not too long ago that I'd talk about video games more often on this channel, and lo and behold, I just finished Neva, the latest game from Barcelona developers Nomada Studio. Indeed, Barcelona seems to be the gift that keeps on giving. I was just there for my summer vacation this year, and I had the time of my life. So clearly this city has more surprises in store for me this year. Anyways, it's been roughly 6 years since their last game. That was the indie beloved darling Gris. I don't know why I still haven't played that game. In fact, I'm pretty sure I have it in one of my libraries, either on the PlayStation, Steam, or Switch. I need to look into that, because if that game is anywhere close to the passion project that this game Neva is, I think I'm in for one hell of a ride. And I'm pretty sure everyone who would take a first glance look at either screenshots or trailers will realize that Neva is one of the most beautiful games to come out in 2024. The cinematography is simply stupendous in this game, and the sense of scale creates this truly mesmerizing sense of awe. But putting aside the visual beauty for a moment, and don't get me wrong, the praises can be sung eternally for that on its own. We could just end the review there. Even on that its own makes the game well worth checking out. But me being a game developer, I'm particularly impressed with the gameplay that was crafted here. The gameplay vocabulary you have is quite limited. For the most part, this is a parkour platforming kind of game. So it is a side scroller, so you can move left to right. You have a double jump, and you also have this dash that also doubles as a dodge mechanic. So as you can see, your toolbox is quite limited, but me being a level designer, I'm really impressed by the variety of events that's created here. Especially when I look at it with the rational level design kind of brain, I'm really enamored with the way the game is introducing gameplay blocks and then builds on them up into these very crescendo, super memorable climactic moments. There's so much variety created here with the limited resources at hand. And I think one of the elements that helps feed that variety is the game's thematics. Specifically, this game has a 4-act narrative structure which mirrors the 4 seasons. So we start off in the summer, then the fall, winter, spring. It's something we've seen time and time again in films, games, what have you. But here it's not just an aesthetic window changing element, which that as well as a much appreciated visual variety, and it does look beautiful in each of the 4 seasons. But really these seasonal qualities give these really interesting and meaningful varieties to the gameplay flavor. I won't spoil what they are, but they are quite, once again, simple, but always very clever and rather novel. It is much appreciated. And along with the passage of the seasons, there's also this interesting passage of time that's mirrored in your companion, Neva, this beautiful and super cute magical doggo-like creature. Obviously, I won't spoil any of the narrative details surrounding that character and your adventure itself, but I do love all the gameplay interactions you have with this companion. It's all mapped on one button. You can either call out to Neva to have it come closer to you, or when it's running too far away, just like, hey, like, where are you going? Come back, please. I'm worried about you. And you can also, of course, pet it when you're up close. So it is all super cute and endearing, and the animations are very evocative of those emotions. Totally knocks out the park on that front. But speaking of animations, the highlight of that factor in this game are the boss fights. And yes, there are boss fights in this game. I knew that there would be a bit of action going to this game, but I didn't realize it would be quite so satisfying. There's some really great and memorable moments that I had in this game. And it's also a pretty decent challenge. Obviously, it's not from software level of challenge. That's not the kind of game this is. But there's enough meat on the bones here, especially in the sense of giving this much needed urgency and drive to the narrative. So as you can tell, I pretty much love this game, but I do have a few points of constructive criticism to give to this game. Nothing earth-shattering, of course, but it's always interesting to go over these points, however minor some of them may be. So speaking of the gameplay a moment ago, there are some paths where you respawn are a little too long to get back to the challenge you were at a moment ago. For the most part, when you die, you respawn exactly where we were at the challenge before, but there are a few cases where you have a long path to just get back there, and I felt it was a little unnecessary, especially considering that's a little inconsistent in the overall design. And much in that same vein, I do find that some of the parkour challenges leave a little bit of wait time, specifically to just reset the parkour path. You're just left waiting until like, oh, okay, now I can go try my challenge again. Once again, it's nothing earth-shattering, but it did happen on a few occasions where just standing there waiting. Though arguably my biggest problem with this game, which it's ironic that I use the word big, because it's the fact that you're kind of tiny on screen. There are some moments where I literally lost sight of where I was, mostly because there's foreground elements that kind of obscure your vision, and then the camera's zooming out at the same time, so you find yourself in these situations wondering, where the hell am I on screen? And a similar issue arises with, especially with the color in the environments, which kind of make you merge into the background, and this only gets worse in the scenes that feature fog, because then the vision is obscured even further. Much the same can be said for some of the climbing sections in the game. There are some surfaces that are sprinkled these white dots, if you will, that show that, oh, you can climb that surface. It's simple and elegant and it works well for the most part. But there's some sections of the game that feature a lot of cool and light colors in the environment. So tiny white dots on light gray environments is kind of hard to read by default. And then when you add the extra layer of the fog, as I mentioned before, it gets even harder to see. Nothing insurmountable, of course. You'll end up figuring out where to go eventually, but these are little frictions that get in the user experience of it all. And finally, as for the ending, obviously I'm not going to spoil what happens in the end, but I do find this a little anticlimactic in terms of the gameplay. In terms of the story, I do think it's quite interesting and touching how it ends, so I am satisfied in that regard. But I do find that I was missing one last gameplay sequence to just have this like final crescendo moment. In hindsight, there is a bit of a moment like that before, and it was a nice moment, but I felt like it was an intro to that final sequence that I felt was coming. But it never really happened, and there were other sequences in the game that I felt were much more grandiose and epic. But even with these relatively minor quips aside, I do think that this is a minimalistic labor of love that you should totally check out. Unlike so many AAA games out there, there is literally no excess bloat whatsoever in this game. It's quite short, it took me roughly 3 hours to finish it, and I don't see myself complaining at all about it. I'm very much satisfied with this experience. So I'm rating anywhere between an 8.5 and a 9 out of 10. This game is short and to the point, and it aims straight for your heart. I have a feeling this is going to resonate really strongly with a lot of folks. So with all that being said, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. Take care and talk to you soon.